All right. Hello, Athena. How are you?
I'm well. Hi.
Hi. Thank you so much for being on the podcast today. I can't wait to have a conversation with you because we go way back, which is
hmm
really fun. But there's been so much transformation in your life since I've known you, however,
Yeah.
10, maybe 12 years. And so I would love to dive in just a little bit of conversation on like your journey, like
Yeah.
motherhood, like how have you gotten to where you are right now?
Yeah. Oh, I love it. I love that you're going into it in that way. And I love the title of the podcast, The Reawakened Mom.
Thank you.
I was actually just doing a little exercise, a little business and personal life exercise the other night where they have you make a timeline of your own story.
Ooh,
And it was some Christian business coaches that I follow actually, and so they combine a little bit of spirituality into business and personal goal setting. And so as I wrote my story, and they tell you go back as far as you feel, I started with birth and then worked my way on through all of these changes.
yeah.
And I realized as I was, journaling all my milestones that, by the time I was in fifth grade, I had been in like five different elementary schools, and then following that through to highs and lows through college, through having my first child, marital separations, etc. I thought, wow, I feel like if I'm an expert at anything, I'm an expert at transformation and change. I mean,
Yes.
starting from birth, right? Starting from birth. So it was really interesting to see that timeline and just to be settled in, which I already pretty much am, but settled into kind of, maybe this all happened as a part of my mission in life. And that's essentially what the exercise takes you to, is that all of your major milestones in life, they guide you into who you are and what your offering is and what you feel passionate about and what you're, standing for and wanting to fight for. And so, yeah, in the years that we've known each other, even since I've moved to the beach, I moved here with my husband, and immediately went through some major transformations with the loss of my mom and the marriage falling apart and the birth of my daughter. Not in that order, but right. But all those things kind of happening within like a year, and then losing myself entirely,
Yeah.
right? And I actually wrote in my timeline, my milestones the other night, that point of losing myself and realizing like I don't even know who I am, and I don't even think I want to live anymore because I don't want to live like how I'm living, and I don't want to repeat anything from my past, so I don't even know where to go, right? And so
Wow.
it was in that point where I actually sought out the assistance of a shaman. And it took me having also some major health issues, as tends to happen when we come to a shaman. Usually, discomfort alone is not the thing. It takes us really getting knocked down in
Wow.
order to decide to make a change. So at that point, I went to a shaman, and I would say that's where I started to find myself again. And that's that point where I kind of became, so to say, reawakened, right? As
Yeah.
the name of your podcast. That's when I reawakened into a new version of myself. And there were other times in life where I awakened into new versions of myself. And I was actually just saying with a client the other day that we move in these cycles. Some of us it's 7 years, some of us it's 12 years, but we move in these cycles, which numerologically, if you follow like numerology and that type of thing, astrology, there's a reason why sevens and 12s are associated with transformation. So you'll find that there are marriages that, make it through certain points where maybe they end on a 7 year point in a cycle, or they end on an 11, 12. Like I've talked to a lot of people recently, and
Hmm.
especially in the last 2 years, they're like, oh, we were 11 years together. So it was like right before that 12-year point.
That's so interesting.
Yeah. Isn't that fascinating?
That is so fascinating. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I had no idea. I'm like all enthralled. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
Whatever you're saying, I'm like so into right now.
Yeah, yeah, it's crazy. So, yeah, for myself, I feel like that was kind of like that point when I went to that shaman. I was like, I don't want to feel like this anymore. I don't want to live anymore. And essentially, for all of us, when we get to that point where we say, I don't want to live anymore, it's like you don't want to live like this anymore, but you don't know how to live. So, that's that really, really powerful opportunity to give birth to a new version of yourself and to
Yeah.
transform into something new. And I did, I would say, in the last so it's been 5 years now, completely changed myself. I chopped my hair off, dyed it, all the things. Went through some, like, I healed myself physically from some of the chronic pain and gastrointestinal stuff that I was dealing with, healed that entirely. um, Redid my entire wardrobe. I told a woman the other day, I was like, okay, time for a new wardrobe. Start with your underwear. Like, literally, that's where you start. The place where only it's only for you. And a
Yeah.
lot of women will think, oh, nobody's gonna see my underwear. She's a single woman. I'm like, no, this is because it's for you. So
Yeah.
go throw out all of your underwear and buy new ones.
Yeah.
That's the jump off for your transformation, is the
Yeah.
things that others can't see,
Yeah.
right?
I love that the journey, like writing your timeline out like that. And you said all of your milestones, because I
Mm-hmm.
think we as women tend to be so hard on ourselves and don't look at all the things that we have done, even the smallest things, as
Yeah.
the wins and the milestones in our life. And, to actually go back and look at all of those things that you have done and be proud of
Mm-hmm.
yourself along your journey is
Yeah.
just such a hard thing for us to do.
So hard. Yeah, and that's a big thing that I work with a lot of my clients on, is, they hold the weight of the past when they're especially moms, when they're like, oh, why didn't I do that thing? I should have done this or that. And they're just like holding themselves in the weight of the past decisions they made, which were the best decisions they could make at the time. They were only working with what they were working with at the time.
Yeah.
So I'm really big on grace, and I'm always encouraging my clients and myself to have grace, and my children and my partner have grace for others, for where they are and where they were, and meet them where they are right now. So you do
Yeah.
that with yourself. If you find that, especially as a mother, oh, I wish I had so much guilt over circumcising my first son. My first son, because I was like 21. And then, later I was more educated with my second son, which was like 9 years later. And I learned all these horrible things about circumcision. And I was like, oh my God, I'm not going to circumcise him. And then I was like, I feel terrible that I did that to my first son. But I
Oh,
had to forgive myself for that, because I didn't know at the time any of the things that I even was able to access 9 years later with the invention of Google and YouTube. And, where 9 years later, I was able to actually watch a circumcision procedure being done on YouTube. When my first son was a newborn, there was no Google or YouTube, and I couldn't even go find that
yeah.
information. And I
Yeah.
just listened to the doctors. They just tell you to do these things, and you just do it.
Yeah, I just recorded a podcast episode with a doula, and she talked all about that, just knowing that you have so much more power than you think that you have,
Yes,
and
yes.
so much more the power to say no to things,
Right.
and intuitively. And there's so much information out there that just because a hospital says, like, you have to do this, or this is
Yeah.
what we do, this is common practice, doesn't mean that you have to do it.
No, no, indeed. And unfortunately, we've been programmed and conditioned to put all of our trust and faith. No offense, because I am fully in partnership with Western medicine. But when we put all of our faith in anything, I mean, look at, let's say even with the church, how many times have we heard in the news and the media about, or met people who were exploited in the church because they put so much faith and so much authority in the church, or unfortunately, teachers or coaches or any time. So we do the same thing with doctors. They're human. And
Yeah.
so They'll tell us certain things, and then because we're programmed, respect authority, listen to what they say, do what they say, don't question it, we find ourselves sometimes being exploited or making decisions that aren't aligned with what we feel in our heart, in our gut, in our
Yeah.
soul is right.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
could we go back to talking? I'm like, wait, okay. So we're going to be like three parts here, but could we
Okay.
go back? So when you were talking about being married previously and then losing yourself and then, and your divorce, going to see a shaman, all those things, like
Yeah.
what were you kind of going through during that time? Because I think so many women, moms, we are trying to be everything for everyone else, and it's so easy to
Mm.
lose ourselves.
Yes.
So, like, what was kind of happening during that time for you when
Yeah.
you were married, you had moved to a new area, like you
Right.
had child, like in a different career? Like, tell me kind of what you were going through and what kind of led
Yeah.
to you finding a shaman and divorce and that kind of information. I think that would be really helpful.
Yeah, yeah. So I'd say this is very common of us, especially in motherhood, but I was putting all of my focus and attention into my children. I found myself with two small children. And so I had left work. Before we moved to the beach, I lived in DC and I worked in architecture there. And so I had done like some yoga teacher training before we left the city. And I was like, when we move to the beach, I just want to be home with my kids and maybe just teach them yoga. Right. Now, that was also a big part of my transformation because I left an entire identity. I remember like purging my wardrobe from that point.
Yeah.
So I had all these like anthropology clothes and like nice clothes, banana and like Benetton clothes. And then all of a sudden it was like yoga pants and tank tops every day. Right. And like prana or whatever. So I completely changed the way that I dressed. My hair, I went from like straightening my hair to being completely natural curly hair,
I
right?
don't know if I've ever seen your hair straight, by the
You
way.
haven't,
I'm
you
like,
haven't.
I'm trying to go back and I'm like, I've never known you was straight. I can't even
No,
visualize that right
no,
now.
because when I moved to the beach, I was like, that was my old self, and I was done with that. So I stopped. I never did it again, right? I think one time in the last 5 years did I straighten my hair before I chopped it. Um, So I left that entire identity. Moving to the beach, I knew no one. I didn't know a single person when I moved here. So here I am, this new version of myself with these two small children, and I know no one. And my husband starting a new job. So I just poured myself entirely into my kids. Um, we had some great times. I have a lot of photos and video of those first couple of years, and I would never take it back for anything. But as happens when we fixate on one thing and we don't give attention to other areas of our home or our life or our body, other things start to fall apart. So it's like the pie. I say when we look at the mother's life, we have to make sure that we're kind of somewhat evenly divided between self, relationship, purpose, motherhood, because otherwise the areas where we're not focused, they can completely fall off and fail. And sometimes we need to focus in one area, but if we put all of our focus onto one thing, then everything else is going to fail.
Yeah.
And this is what happened, right? So I found myself with my complete focus on my children. They were my source of joy. They were my source of identity. They were my source of purpose. They were my everything. My partner, he was a very free spirit. He's an artist. So he was like, teaching art and making art and surfing and just in his own world in this new place, having a totally different experience. My mom was also very sick in Ohio. So I found myself, right before my daughter was born, my mom passed away 5 months before. And it was on Christmas Day, actually. So we're in this new town. She passes away. I have a child. My husband's like totally disconnected from me, having his own experience. And I just sank to the way bottom of the sea within my own self. That started to show up because I tried to keep the focus on the children and not address it, right? So that started to show up as chronic pain in my body. And then that started to show up as gastrointestinal issues that were placing me in the hospital like week after week.
Mhm.
And then, you know, lots of testing, the doctors not being able to figure it out, me thinking it was cancer because that's what mommy just passed from. And they couldn't figure it out. So I was going for months, like vomiting every day with this severe pain, like barely able to function, trying to care for my kids. And it got to the point where I couldn't really care for my kids. Um, and I work with a lot of women now that are in that place where they get to that edge where they can't mother the way that they wanted to, and they've been through a very similar process. At that point, a neighbor had told me about a shaman. I never heard of a shaman in my life, actually. And you know, she's like, maybe you want to try her out because it seems like doctors aren't working, right? And I was seeing a therapist, you know, and you know, I was trying a lot of different things. And I went into this shaman and she like put me on a table and did some energy work and then turned me over, was shaking my legs and whatever. And then she's a local shaman, Terry Pippin, the medicine woman. And so she turned me over and she said to me, "No, what are you sad about?" And I
Mm,
was like, oof, my mom. Now, she didn't know me, so she didn't know a single thing about my story. She just knew that I was in pain and I had just left a hospital in Milford, right? And I was like, I need to do something. So she starts talking. She's like, your mom's right here. And she starts talking and giving me messages from her. And I'm like, how on earth is this woman doing this, right? And she's like, you have these gifts too that you're not using. And she started talking to me about clairvoyance, you know, that, oh, your mom was clairvoyant and you're clairsentient, and like telling me these words that really, like, I had just kind of started to learn. And I knew my mom was clairvoyant. I knew the women in my family had gifts. And they did things like laying hands on people and healing them as I was growing up. And I always kind of just was like, you know, not interested.
yeah.
So anyway, she said to me, like, if you don't if you don't grieve, it's going to turn into cancer.
Mm.
I said, okay. So I went home and I like called everyone. I was like, oh my God, I had the craziest experience. Like I met a shaman and she told me this about mommy and blah, 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 blah. And she said I have to grieve. And they're like, well, did she tell you how to grieve? And I was like, no. Right. So I was like, okay. So I just sat down that night and I prayed and I asked, you know, well, how do I grieve? And I heard, write a letter to mommy. And I was like, okay. So I wrote a letter that night, my first letter. And the next day I was healed,
Oh my
completely healed.
gosh.
It was insane. Right. So there was something to it. And then, long story short, within a month, that same shaman had said to me, like, maybe you want to do a shaman training. Like, what do you want to do with your life? I was like, I don't know. I don't know what I want to do. So maybe you want to do shaman training. So after waking up healed, and then in the same month, I met two other shamans, which I had never met a shaman in my life.
Right.
Right. So I'm like, okay, this is weird. And I'm a threes person at that point. So I'm like, I know, like, if something happens in threes, I have enough common sense to know it's a message for me. So I signed up for the shaman training. And that was like, I guess, like just about almost 7 years ago, like 6 years ago. And I just haven't had a chance to think twice. My practice took off. I've done multiple trainings. I've traveled all over the country training with different shamans. Um, I actually, you know, joined an integrative health practice, like kind of right out of the training. And then I opened my own wellness studio a few years back. And then with all the craziness of COVID, we decided, oh, let's go ahead and dissolve the business because people weren't really able to come into our physical
Yeah.
space and we're holding this rent and owning all these things. And so in June, I actually kind of closed out my time with my studio. And now I'm working solo and I'm doing a lot of training and teaching and kind of growing my own team of shamans.
That's
That's where I
amazing.
am. Yeah.
Yeah, it's so beautiful, and just to be able to recognize that and to listen, because I think so many times we can get at inner advice and we don't listen to it. So
Yes.
being able to actually listen and hear, oh, write a letter, and then you did, that
Yeah.
is so huge for you to even have listened in the first place.
Correct. Yeah, that's huge. And that's one thing that I feel really passionately about, creating space for my clients and the people in my group programs to sit down from where they are. So we do Zoom now, you know, with a lot of the group stuff. So we have people from all over the country, um, world actually. And so they're able to come in, and we just hold space for each other. And sometimes we will do those types of exercises, journaling, writing letters to the soul of those we need to forgive or grieve. And then we'll share. And it's so powerful to have that safe space to go and actually be held accountable for doing it. Because
Yeah.
so many times we think, oh, I need to do that, but then we don't act on it. So it creates that space for us to come in and actually do the work and feel safe to do the work.
Yeah. Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
that's so beautiful. So then you
Yeah.
saw the shaman, then you were healed, and then did you, I know, I'm like, I'm walking
Yeah.
on your
Yeah.
milestone timeline here. But
Yeah. Yeah.
there's a couple of things that I want to hit on. So then at that point, once you were healed, and then once you started getting into that practice, is that when your marriage started to dissolve, when you kind of figured like out who
Ooh.
you were, and that maybe this wasn't the best space for you, or that, I don't know if you want to go into that, but
Yeah,
just
that's
curious
exactly
about that.
right. Yeah, and I ended up writing a book about that process actually called Leave with Love, because it was around that time that I was finding myself and I was feeling exactly what I love how you just worded that, but that wasn't the greatest space for me. So let's say, you know, a lot of times when we're transforming, I think of us like butterflies, you know, like little caterpillars that go into a cocoon. We have to be alone with ourselves for a while, and it's uncomfortable and awkward. And then we come out and we don't even know what we're going to be when we come out, but we come out. So I needed to go into a cocoon of sorts to grow. And during that time, I actually went to my husband, and we had been, you know, pretty much high school sweethearts. We dated off and on through high school. I'd known him since middle school, loved him to pieces, even when I wanted to separate. So during that time, I went to him and I said, you know, I feel like I want to separate for a little bit and maybe come back together, but I just feel like I can't live with you right now. And so that's exactly right. It was the space. The space wasn't conducive to the growth that I needed to navigate. And
Mhm.
so originally for me, in my mind, it wasn't going to be a permanent separation. And I also feel very passionately now about supporting couples through temporary separations, because for individuals who are partnered, especially if you're partnered for large portions of your life, right? Because we had known each other for 16 years,
Yeah.
right? And so for us and for others, sometimes you just need some space to kind of transform, morph, you know, go into a space of your own, and then come out, and then you both come out much more beautiful because
Yeah.
of that. Um, Unfortunately, we weren't quite in alignment with that. And then also, as what happens a lot of times when we're going through those moments, the universe kind of will catalyze the exit process. So I had said to him, hey, you know, this year I'd like to move out, take some space, like, you know, I'm not really feeling like I can be myself here. Several months later, I ended up meeting another person,
Mm.
right? And that other person, kind of what I was saying about that butterfly, woke some things up within myself that needed to be aroused, so to say, to put me in touch with the woman that I was becoming. And that was a temporary thing as well. So that's where a lot of marriages also get tripped up, is when that kind of catalytic um, third party enters in, right? And then we're not trained for how to navigate that. And I've actually studied this quite a bit. And in ancient Native American times, that was something that was understood, right? Of when that temporary party might come in, and when couples would take a little bit of a separation. There have been cultures that understand that, and they honor that process. However, in our culture, for the most part, but maybe on the West Coast they do, because I you know, I work with clients all over, so I hear different things. So as a people, as a collective, we're starting to explore different types of relationships, different types of relationship transitions. These are all things that I feel really passionately about. So with that said, we parted ways, and unfortunately, we did not come back together. as I'd kind of hoped at that
Yeah.
time. Once I let go, once he let go, and that was quite a process for us as well, very painful process. We were able to, successfully co-parent, which we still do. We live 5 minutes apart. We co-parent our children very well, I would say. I think it's all relative, but I think we co-parent very well.
Yeah.
Um, and so from that point, I dated, which was a whole thing too for
Oh
several
my gosh.
years.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did not want to deal with the dating process by any means. And I would joke to my friends, like, I just want to be walking on the beach and then Prince Eric just washes up on the beach, right? Like, I don't want to look, I don't want
Easy.
to wait. Yeah,
Yeah.
how can we make this easy? Like, I definitely want to, have someone, but I don't want to do the whole, all the searching thing. So I explored dating for a couple of years. And then, so to say, my Prince Eric did kind of wash up, during a time when I was single and really happy and settled. And it was at my kid's field day at school that I met him. So,
Oh my goodness.
and my friend's mom said later, she's like, that's crazy because you said like years ago that you wanted Prince Eric, and like you got your Prince Eric. He just literally just washed up at field day.
That's so crazy. And so
Yeah.
did you start, like, did something happen? Did you guys get together right away, or was it a process, or were you still kind of, you know,
Yeah, that was
no,
a
you
pro-
gotta tell
that
me
was
about
a
that.
process.
Tell me about that. Whatever you
I
want to
know.
say,
That
but
was
tell
a
me.
total that was more of, why in my second and third books, because the first book is published and out, and it's, it's helpful for leaving relationships of all kinds. The second and third books, that I've been working on kind of chronicle our story, our experience, and what a lot of other of my clients have experienced when they meet someone who's previously divorced or just going through the dating process when you don't want to,
Yeah.
when you still have old programming you're trying to drop, and like old beliefs that are cutting into your new experience. So there was a lot of synchronicity around when my Prince Eric washed up, right? And initially it was our first meeting was just very friendly. He's a teacher at the high school. My son was at the high school, and I remember I just said to my son, he and I talked. We hit it off. We talked about yoga in my studio, and he was like my first instinct with him was like meathead,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
like CrossFit shirt, like very fit, and he was bald, and like he just looked like a meathead.
Yeah.
And so I have always been more geared towards artists, like yogis and artists, not that look.
Yeah.
So for me, meeting him, there was no thought of anything of the sort. But I was like, wow, you can feel his heart. You can feel this is such a good person, very open minded, non judgmental. There was this purity to his spirit. And so I said to my son who was with me, I really hope you get that teacher next year. That was it.
Oh my gosh. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
that was it. And then, like, months went by, and then I also assumed at the time that he was happily married because he was with his mother-in-law at field day.
Yeah.
So I just thought, this is a person he's just a nice guy. I'm not interested. Then I started dating someone through the fall, and I ran into him a few times. Our kids were always in the same class every year too.
Mm. Well,
So I ran into him a few times, and then I'd say like the following winter, because that was June of one year. Then the following February, we ended up one of those synchronous things. I'm typically late for things. So I was late for my daughter's kindergarten screening, and there were two chairs outside the room. Got her in there, sat down, and then he came in early because he's chronically early. So our kids went in together, our two babies who were screening for kindergarten, and it was just us two in this long hall together. And we started talking again. He started telling me about some of the books he was reading and how he was journaling. And I kind of did a double take. I was like, you?
right.
You are journaling, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
you read what? I was like, those are books I read. So I'm like, who are you?
Right.
So he told me about how he'd been working with a spiritual coach in
Oh
like
my goodness.
Mexico. I know, in Mexico. And I was like, well, and again, not interested in any way. I said, well, I do that work and I live right here. So I was like, you don't actually have to have a spiritual coach in Mexico. So I was like, check out my site. If you're interested in somebody local, I have an office and a studio and I do all this work right here. And he was like, no way. So that night he booked an appointment and
Okay.
then he came in the next day, actually. And that was a point where we started working together. And then I learned that he'd been going through a very painful relationship transition since
Gotcha.
the first time we met the year before, which had no idea. Um, and he was actually going through, healing from the ending of that marriage. So we became friends because I thought, well, I don't know a lot of divorced people around here, that are single. Seems like everybody's partnered up. And he's like, yeah, I can make dinner and have you over sometime. I was like, sure. Just thinking friends, So we had this beautiful friendship that developed over time, over several months. And then finally one day I kind of caught it where I was like, wait a second.
Yeah.
And he said, oh, I'm thinking of going to this jazz show in Philly. Do you want to go? Right? And I'm going to get a hotel. And I was like, well, if you get one with two beds,
Yeah.
like
Right.
get a hotel with two beds, stranger danger. So at that point, we had our first like official date, and he'd done little things like so I'm originally from Louisiana. My dad's Creole, so he'd done things that I didn't actually catch right away. And later he would tell me stories. But one of the first times I came for dinner, he made this Creole dish, and it was really good. He'd ask me like, "What kind of food do you like?" I was like, "I don't know, like seafood. I'm from Louisiana, Creole, whatever." And so he'd made this like Creole scallop dish. And later he told me that he'd never made it before, and he had his friends come over the weekend before and practiced making it and had them
Aw.
try it. And he'd gone through all this effort to make this special dish for me, honoring my home. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
So
that's so
yeah,
cool.
so it's been a couple of years now, and we've gone through, moving in together and blending families. We now raise five children together, which is wild.
Yeah. Talk
Right.
about that because it's hard enough to raise your own children and then to bring other, you know what I mean? Like we know. So then to bring other kids into the mix and another parenting style, um,
Yeah.
your kids versus my kids, and then bringing it together. And then sometimes they're with
Right.
the other parent, and sometimes you're by
Yeah.
yourself, and sometimes you aren't. Like, how does that
Yeah.
work?
It's
How does that?
wild. Yeah, so we were on different schedules with the children and it was very chaotic. Because we'd have the kids all together and then we'd have just his and then we have just mine and then they'd all be together. And it was nice. It's very nice when you have time with each group of kids um, without the other so that you can dedicate. However, we were also running into the kids would have anxiety because and they'd get really sad because they'd know, especially with our boys are like best friends and brothers, and so they would get sad on Wednesday because they would know that tomorrow they're not going to see each other,
Oh,
so then we had this issue of, okay, how do we navigate this, because on Wednesdays we're having some issues in the home, some sadness, tears, stress around like we got to stay up late together because we're not going to see each other tomorrow. So we played around with a couple different schedule ideas, and the one that we ended up settling on with his side, because my kids, we had a nice flow going, where we had the week split perfectly in half, me and their father. He had a little bit more of, one day here, one day there, 2 days here, etc.
yeah.
So it was kind of a lot of back and forth, also chaotic.
Yeah.
So I said, how can we get more of a nice flow going with our kids here so that we don't have all of these high roller coaster of emotions at night and in the morning and change every single day? Like we want to flow. So we changed now, and we didn't know if we wanted to have the same schedule. We actually didn't want to, but we ended up with the same schedule. And it's been a godsend because we have a much better flow with the children. We have routines. Everybody feels relaxed and settled in the evenings. We can plan things, and we don't have, that anxiety around,
Yeah.
oh, I'm not going to see you, or I'm not going to see him, or the next day. But to, to the role of being kind of like the bonus mom is what I call myself. I would say, especially looking back at the milestones of my life, I was born, the mommy who I know as mom was actually my adopted mom. Right. So I was born to a teenage mother who wasn't ready for motherhood. And so I was raised with a sister who was the same age, who was my adopted mom's birth daughter.
Okay.
Right. It's kind of tricky. And so, which is a whole thing, because then you go into like my adopted mom was my maternal grandmother, and it was like very complicated, but I never knew. I just knew she was my mom. I never actually knew she wasn't my mom until grade school.
Okay.
So she treated me and my sister the same, right? So I never felt like I was not hers. And as we grew up into, teenage years, adulthood, I never felt like she loved me any less. So what I've explained to my children is that that's really important, that all my children in my house, they feel my love the same. And even though I might have a different love for each one, that they all feel that love and they never feel like they're not mine.
Right.
Right. So I think that my bonus kids, I would say that they genuinely feel that. We have very close relationships, to where, like they'll snuggle me, or they'll, make art for me, and we honor that relationship. It definitely creates some tension with my mainly my daughter. Right, because girls are a little different than boys. Don't care, the boys don't care, the girls, they
They don't
care.
even notice. They're like, whatever, we're just gonna go
Yeah,
play.
yeah. Girls are like, that's my mom. So I have to explain to her, like, well, you have a stepmom too. She does. And I said, so, what if she had a kid? And would you want her to treat her kid differently than what she treats you? She's like, no. And I said, okay. So that's what I want. I want her to love you the same as she loves. If she ever has a child, I want her to love you the same as she loves her own child. And that's what I have to do with my bonus children.
Yeah.
Right. So that's a difficult thing for a 6-year-old to understand.
Right.
Um, so that's still one of those tricky things navigating. So, we do things like we make it a point to make dates with each child individually so that they get that time that they need with us. And
Yeah.
sometimes we'll do like a sleepover, like, the girls will sleep in the bed with me, or I'll sleep in the bed with my daughter, or he'll sleep with his youngest son, so we move beds a lot.
Yeah, because your age range is it 6, or is there one younger than 6?
6 is the youngest. So we
Okay.
have two 6-year-olds who are about to be 7, and we have two 9-year-olds. And then we have a 17-year-old.
Right, because I'm like, there is an age range too. So
Yes.
I'm curious because I'm also a bonus mom. So
Oh,
when
yeah. Which
yeah,
I
when
didn't know. I didn't know that.
yeah, well, because when I met you, he was pretty much out of the house. Like he's 29,
Oh my God. I didn't
29,
know
Athena.
that. Okay, that's why I didn't know. Yeah.
Yeah. So we didn't go through it as much because we weren't a blended family, but still I had
Right.
that, Slater was my first like child that I was trying to raise. Not raise, but like his mom's still in the
Right.
picture. And so we
Right.
went through him being with us and her and all the
Yeah.
different roles, and then us having different rules
Oh,
and boundaries that maybe she didn't have. So it was a lot of
right.
I felt like every time he would come to the house, it was like almost like settling back into our rules. It was like a day of like
Exactly.
unlearning,
Yes.
being
Yeah.
like relearning again what the rules were
Exactly.
here. And I know that that has to be so hard
Yeah.
on the kids because really they're the ones traveling, right? We're just staying
Exactly.
and they're traveling.
Exactly. They are. And I, like for a time when David and I were dating, and I was going back and forth from my house to his house, or he would go back and forth from his house to my house. For him, it's like he's bald, so he doesn't have like hair products. For him, he would just come in whatever he was going to wake up and then go home and shower and change.
Yeah.
For me, I was like, I have like special night creams and like makeup and hair, and I like my soap. So like that going back and forth, even just in dating, is
Yeah.
a pain. And
And then if
so
you forget something, it's like,
you
"Oh my
forget
gosh."
something and then you don't feel quite at home. So with our children, I'm very mindful of that with their belongings because, one, and I've read a lot of books on co-parenting and step families. And we've worked with different, therapists as a family. And one thing that I feel really strongly about is when I buy my child something, it's theirs. And so it's not mine. And my kids have said that, um, that this is mine. And I'm like, it certainly is. If you want to take that to dad's house, that's fine because it's yours. If you lose it, that's on you. Right. But that's really important because I think sometimes with separate households, parents can put that stress. And I see the stress on my children if, they're like carrying their shoes, to school that dad bought and that they were instructed to take these shoes back to dad's house, and I'm like,
Yeah,
I don't want them to ever feel that stress about having to remember one more thing on top of all the transitions that they're going through already in the
yeah,
week.
yeah,
But being mindful of that and just having routines has been such a godsend for us. And I'm not a very disciplined individual, so I've had to work with therapists and coaches just to be more disciplined to keep my family in order.
yeah.
And doing like I mean all, I could literally I am going to write a book on this, but like Etsy, going on to Etsy and finding charts for routines to print off with the children, and I've done it all, like laminated charts, put the velcro, I can show you, um doing like morning charts, night charts, like chart for the teenager. I laminate the crap out of everything, tape it up, food charts on the refrigerator just to like, make it easy. We ordered this really cool Japanese label maker. Like
Oh
things
my
are
gosh.
labeled. Nobody can ask me where does something go because it's labeled, right?
Oh my gosh, I love that.
It helps because I by nature am not that disciplined, and so kind of having that I can like build into our family system has been so helpful.
Yeah, that it is very helpful, and I used to be a school teacher,
Oh
and,
yeah. So
all of the things well, it's interesting because I used to work at the consortium, and so everything that you're saying is visual supports. I mean, we would
Yes.
offer visual supports to the students because it would help them, and it's like, yeah, but it helps everyone. It doesn't matter if you have autism or you don't. Like, it's a
Right.
visual so that your brain makes so many choices in a day and so many decisions, you don't have
Yeah,
to think about it. It's just, "Oh, it's there. I see it.
exactly.
Cool." I don't have to
Right.
ask for help. It's there.
There it
And
is. And then boom, boom, boom. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's just so smart because that's literally what it is. It's just
I
such a
love that.
helpful little tool, and it doesn't take much time, but it also helps alleviate so many problems.
Woo. It does. It does. Because we have people who eat differently, because you blend families. So another thing is like meals. So then we go from having like, my kids, two out of the three are pretty diverse eaters. And so they'll eat, my oldest and my baby love Japanese food, sushi, dumplings, like you name it, rice every day. They love Japanese food. They'll eat almost anything, edamame, like whatever. My middle, he was always my white food person from birth. I was like, how did I give birth to a child that only eats white foods? I never even heard of this until he was one, and he would deny foods from me. Literally, he would just deny food. Well, probably 6 months old on, but one, he was very firm and like no. And I started to see the pattern. He's only eating white foods, right? He'll eat like an apple if I peel it. He'll eat boiled eggs. This is the baby. So he was always more that difficult eater in my household. So you combine, it's me, three of us eat diverse foods, and then one not so much. And then we move into this home with very different eating style. And I also was more plant-based eater. So then my partner, very meat eater. He was a meathead. He is a meathead. We have a whole, I was like, can we buy a new freezer for your meat? Right?
Oh,
Because he's such a meat eater. So he's like, all meat. And I'm like, whoa, too much meat. And then my kids are like, whoa, too much meat because they don't eat this much meat either. And we're more fish and vegetable. So then his children also very like traditional, like American, mac and cheese, chicken tenders, like that's about it. Chicken noodle soup and steak. It's
Yeah.
like they have like so. Anyway, you combine these families with these different ways of eating, and then meals become very stressful. So then we had to tackle that, and we started doing family style meals where we just make a lot of stuff, put in a bunch of containers on the table, and everybody just makes their own plate,
Yeah.
and that's helpful. But then we had where his daughter decided she wanted to be a vegetarian. And so,
Oh,
okay, this is great. She's already a picky eater. So now she wants to be a vegetarian. So I said, well, I've been vegetarian, before. And so we can tackle that. We need to make sure you have your protein intake, etc. So every day it was this like, what do we have to eat? What do I eat? So I'm like, okay, how do I tackle this? So I found on Etsy, food group, really cute food group charts for each group. And so we printed those, you buy it for like $5,
yeah.
printed them, cut them, laminated them. They're on the fridge. So I will say to her,
You need to
what
send me a picture so I can see this.
yeah, I'll send it to you. It's on my fridge. So I'll say, like, I'll literally go to the fridge and point and I'll say, what protein source did you have tonight? Right. And she'll look at the chart and she'll be like, oh, I'll go get something. And then she'll get it on her own. And it's so much easier than having to like go through, like, okay, what protein? Same thing for vegetables and all the things, point and be like, what vegetable, what grains do you guys want? And then they'll be like, oh, I went to oats, okay, oats. Yeah. So that's just like getting these systems in place, and has been really helpful for this blending process.
Well, I love it, and I think we could probably talk all day because I'm
Yeah.
like, I have many more questions that I need to ask you. But I'm also,
Yeah.
aware of your time and my time, and like I know we could talk forever. Is there anything, I know how intuitive you are about, just something that's like, this is something that I need to say. Is there anything that you feel like you haven't shared or that you feel you would like to just kind of share with, the listeners just about, anything that we've talked
Yeah.
about or anything that maybe
Mm.
so
Yeah.
far?
Yeah, like some parting words for the mom listening, the reawakening mom that's
Yeah.
listening. I would encourage any mama that's listening to reach out for help,
Mm,
right? So every time that I have made any sort of advancement, whether it's like professionally, personally, with my appearance, with motherhood, with all the things, I reach out, I get help, and then all of a sudden I experience this huge weight lifted off of me,
yep,
and things are resolved in ways that are better than what I could have even like done or had the time to do. We try to figure everything out as mothers, and we think everything is our responsibility,
yeah,
but it doesn't have to be. And you would actually be much happier and much lighter if you get the help that you need. So for the mom that's listening, I'm an advocate for reach out and get the help. You just heard me say Etsy is a source of help for me, right? Etsy is a source of help. Like I didn't have to make these chore charts, and they're beautiful. I bought them for maybe those were like $15. I'm managing a renovation process on a rental home. I bought the project management binder stuff on Etsy. Okay. And I made my binder. I didn't have
yeah.
to create the spreadsheets. I didn't have to create the stuff. I ordered it on Etsy for like $15 or $20. I printed it off and I made a binder. The food groups chart, like, yeah, I could keep opening up an iPad and like having this conversation with the kids, but I made my life and their life easier and empowered them by seeking out the help on Etsy. My daughter was struggling last year with the blending process, and I tried everything. I read the books, did all the things. It wasn't enough. I found myself a parent child interactive therapist, and we did play therapy together, and our relationship is so much better, and she's in such a better space because I got that help. Our
Yeah.
house was a mess recently because of constant moving and shifting bedrooms and redecorating and all the things, moving out of my office and bringing my office into the home. um, I finally bit the bullet and hired a professional organizer, and I am so grateful that I did because she knocked it out.
Is that why
And
you're labeling everything?
yeah, yeah. Like I had already kind of like started that, but she came in with her labeler, and I was like, can we do this? Can we do that? Can we do this? And then we bought a labeler for ourselves because the kids were like, that's amazing. She labeled inside of the drawers. It's amazing. So I was like the shelves in my office, she has like teaching supplies, parenting supplies, like all the things. She labeled the shelves in my office, like incredible. So I didn't have the time, the resources, the know-how to do those things. She made my life so much easier. And now if I also hired an administrative assistant, because email and phone and like mailing certificates to my students and my trainees, that's a lot on my plate, as well as working with private clients every day. Though that's at least 10 hours of work every week that I don't. If I want to sleep, I don't have it. If I want to be with my kids, I don't have it. So now she can come into the house, she can do the work that I need done, and she can find things because it's labeled, right?
Love it.
So because I got all that help. So just get the help that you need, whether it's for yourself, if you're trying to like find yourself, personally develop yourself. My shaman was like a coach for me. I have a therapist that I work with. Um, I have also worked with personal style. If I'm like, oh, I want to redefine my style, I've worked with like different styling coach type apps and things. So it doesn't have to be a person. It could be an app. It could be an online course. There's plenty of online courses on everything right now. Homeschool. I was trying to homeschool my oldest kid the last 2 years, and I was like, my plate, I can't do this, too much. I own a business. I work full time and have these small children and all these other things. So I got him into an online program where they have real teachers. So that was help, right? So every time that we're feeling overwhelmed, I would encourage the mama to ask herself, how can I find help for this? Whether it's an online course, a template of a printable, a professional in some field, organizer, admin, cleaning crew. We started today talking about cleaning crews.
Yes.
Get help cleaning your house. Like, we weren't intended to do everything that we're doing
Yeah.
today. That's why our adrenal systems are tapped, and you think you have a thyroid condition, but it's probably just the fact that you need help.
Yeah.
So
Oh,
anyway, that's a whole other
yeah.
conversation.
You'll come back to part 2.
I know.
This would be like a 3-part series of this,
I
like,
know. Seriously, a whole other conversation. Like, moms, how many moms, like, raise your hand, think you have a thyroid condition, right? Get help, please.
everyone. Yeah,
Yeah,
everyone probably.
exactly.
Yes, more than likely. I mean, you see it everywhere.
I see it all the time, every day.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. That was so beautiful. And now my
Yeah.
real last question, because we as women
Yeah.
do not celebrate ourselves
Yeah.
enough. So I want to know, what do you love about yourself right now?
Ooh, that's such a good one. Um, what do I love about okay, so we've come full circle because I was in a time where I was pouring everything into my children and nothing into myself. Like, I feel like I looked haggardly. Like, I look at pictures of myself, I'm like, oh my God, I looked so bad and so unhealthy and, etc. Um, and then I went to, like, I have to remove myself entirely and focus on me. And I was a little bit disconnected from my children, honestly, because I had to shift all my focus onto me. And then I came full circle now to where my children are a big part of my focus right now, but I feel more balanced,
Yeah.
where I feel really fulfilled by my work. I feel fulfilled by my relationship. I feel like I enjoy time with myself, my girlfriends. But my kids are still, so everything over top of everything.
Yeah.
So I would say, like, what I really love about myself right now is the balance that I'm able to maintain and my ability to assert boundaries and say, no, I need this for me. And I really love myself as a mother. Like, I
Yeah.
really work hard to be a good mother, and I love that part of my identity, who I am as a mother. I do. Yeah.
Hmm. So beautiful. Thank you so much. This has been such a
Thank
gift
you.
today to
Oh, thanks for having me. Yeah.
with you, and I've learned things that I didn't even know. So it's like, ooh, this was, educational for me. It's all good. I love it.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Wonderful.
How can people find you? Because they're gonna wanna obviously like find out.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So my website is seasideshaman.com, SHAMAN. com. I'm, relatively active on Instagram. Like sometimes I'll post 3 days in a week. Sometimes I'll post like once in the last 2 months, but I try to post on my stories like pretty regularly. And it's usually just personal stuff in stories, but you get to see kind of like our dynamic with our big 7-figure, family, 7 people in the household and plus dog. So Instagram, I'm pretty active and I respond to messages. And yeah, my book is on Amazon. So I tell people like if you're struggling with a relationship transition or grief, and it could be literally like I write about losing my mom, leaving different jobs, like the fear and I call it the 7 demons of transition. So it's like we enter this battlefield and we're going through transition, and what you're gonna hit, like the denial, the apathy, all the different things that we hit. So the book helps with any kind of a relationship transition, and that's on Amazon. And those are the places where you can find me. Yeah.
Awesome. And I'll make sure I put those in the show notes too, so people can find you a little bit easier. Because everyone's listening, they're not like writing down, or they're like, "Wait, go back.
Yeah.
What did you say?
Yeah. Totally.
Rewind 10 seconds."
Awesome. Yeah.
Thank
Well,
you
thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. See you soon.
All right. Bye bye.